We might stop in a little bit and I'll sit down, but I had some ice cream and now I'm pretty full. So we're gonna go on a little walk and talk about some things. Pennsic, yeah. Wow, it's a lot darker on this street than it usually is. Anyway, if you have any questions about Pennsic, let me know. Otherwise, I'm just going to share my thoughts and experiences as they come to mind. I've been back, I guess, for 2 days now in the real world, as it were. I think today's Sunday. Yeah, I got home late on Friday night. Time starts to lose meaning when you travel around the world and cross time zones and the dateline as often as I do. Anyway, yeah, Pennsic was actually a pretty amazing experience. Sorry, I just turned on the chat. Pennsic was actually a pretty amazing experience. We had perfect weather, in my opinion. And I know small talk, everyone's like, oh, we talk about the weather and that's small talk. But the reality is that we really did have perfect weather, and the weather is a very big and very important component of Pennsic. So if every Pennsic were like this one, that would be great. And I don't know why there's so much traffic here tonight. It is Sunday night. I'm in small town America. There should simply not be this much traffic out here. I don't understand. Anyway, I'm sorry about my voice. It's finally recovering. All the campfire smoke. There was a lot of campfire smoke at Pennsic this year. Not because there were more campfires per se, but because the inversion layer that was created by the smoke really just killed my vocal cords. Yeah. Yeah, it was really comfortable sleeping at night this year at Pennsic. I have to agree with that. Almost too comfortable, as in I was waking up at 4 a.m. and I mean awake. Thank you, jet lag. And that pretty much meant that I was awake when it was kind of at its coldest, and I did not want to get out of bed and do anything at that time. So I just sort of laid in my silk canopy and did some social media stuff. That's when I did most of my posting for Pennsic and most of my video editing. So yeah, weather was perfect. It was actually, they were anticipating that there were going to be, I don't know, I heard some numbers quoted 15,000 people coming to Pennsic this year. That did not happen. There were only 11,400, I think, at the time Troll closed, roughly that, maybe a couple more hundred at most than that. But it was different. There were more people for longer. So by the first Sunday, there were already 5,000 people who had come in through the gate. And so it already felt like a full event practically on that very first weekend, whereas it used to be that first weekend was skeletal, 1,000, 1,500 people at most. And now they're basically started with 5,000 and it just went up from there. So it definitely felt like a much fuller, busier event than it usually did, than it has in the past. We had a full moon, which was great and beautiful, and some of you may have seen my posts on that. We also had the Perseids, so there were a lot of shooting stars actually to be seen, which is pretty neat. I'm actually walking around in my hometown. Some of you may or may not know, but I store my entire Pennsic encampment basically with my Lord Master Papa, as I call him. And so I'm actually home in Milford, Delaware for now, before heading onward back through Ethiopia to Incheon. And now it looks like I'm going through some sort of dark tunnel, but this is just kind of a tunnel of trees and vegetation that has sprung up because the owners of the 18th century mansion that's off to my left decided they don't need to actually trim the trees. Oh, it seems really ominous, doesn't it? Huh. Anywho, let's see. Some highlights of Pennsic. Dancing started way earlier this year than it usually has, at least the official level dancing. My ball was on the very first Friday, so I actually got to open the Pennsic dance scene in a sort of official way. And what was crazy is I think we had 200 or 300 guests at one point at the height of the evening on the middle Friday of the event, whereas normally on the middle Friday, people are still even arriving, but there were just a lot of people. So it was a pretty full event. Now, if any of you have questions, I don't know why the live chat keeps disappearing. Yeah, if any of you have questions, just pop them in the chat and I will happily answer them. And really, it is Sunday night in a town where the downtown part has basically been abandoned by humanity. So I have no idea why there are so many cars now that I'm trying to have a nice quiet walk. Of course, that's how it goes. um, Learned first time I set up my own household encampment for the first time ever. Belfiore, for those who don't know. Oh, my Tessera class. That's the question. So Tessera is this dance that is literally imitating the weaving of fabric. It's for 10 people. It's for 4 couples and 2 shuttles. And the couples are basically the weft. The shuttles weave the warp. And all of the wefts have streamers, and they dance in and out of each other. And basically what is imitating the weaving of brocade or damask cloth. Very complicated process. And so I teach a 2-hour class on it. And I had the class on the very last Thursday, which meant that the only opportunity to dance the dance was that evening at the hoity-toity at Bardici. We actually had exactly 10 people attend the class, which was great, except that one of them couldn't come to Bardici that evening to dance at the hoity-toity party, so we had to have a substitute who didn't take the class. But the class itself went really well. We actually got it down pat at the end. And then when we danced it on that evening, a couple of hours later at hoity-toity, once we knocked the rust off the first time through, the second time through, Tessera went perfectly. And we actually had some friends up who were in the balcony above at Casa Bardici at the villa looking down at the dance, the way it's supposed to be viewed. They didn't film it though. I can't believe they didn't film it. So unfortunately we have no film of it from above, but according to the viewers who were in the gallery, it looked amazing. So I guess next year the key will be putting my camera up there and making sure someone's monitoring it so it doesn't wander off, and then, going from there. So yeah, Tessera went great. All of my classes, actually, that's another thing. All of my dance classes were super well attended. And I was teaching, interestingly, all of my beginner classes, most of them got dropped. They just didn't get scheduled, unfortunately. So I love teaching beginners because it's a great way to introduce people to dance, and I love that kind of energy, but only my advanced classes got scheduled. So I thought I'd probably have no one at them, but actually I had enough in all of my advanced classes for multiple sets, which is unusual. Normally I only have a few people in my advanced classes, but this year we actually had critical mass for all of my advanced classes, Vercepe and Lejadra and Pellegrina, and all these really great dances that we really get to do, twice a year, because you have to have critical mass for a skill for them. So yeah, I feel like unfortunately, because of my jet lag, because I was waking up at 2 and 3 and 4 in the morning, awake for good for the rest of the day awake, by the time 10 o'clock rolled around in the evening, I was generally too dead to go out and either party or go dancing or support other people's balls, because I was literally wavering on my feet, physically swaying back and forth. So I was going to bed pretty early. And I apologize to anyone whose ball I missed, which was pretty much everyone except for anything I was running, because I had to muster the energy to go to my scheduled things, and I just couldn't then muster the energy to go to things where I wasn't a mandatory participant. Hopefully next year I'll remember to bring my melatonin to force myself to sleep longer than 3 or 4 hours a night, which also meant that I feel like I wasn't able to bring the full Contessa to Pennsic, so to say. I wasn't able to, bring all the magic or put on the full Contessa magic that a lot of people sort of rightfully expect from me. But next year, hopefully I will remember the natural medicaments that will help me sleep more soundly. Yeah, my schedule was pretty much, the comment was Darius was wondering about my schedule. Yeah, when I was the most awake, literally everyone had just gone to bed. And the most energetic, it was so cold that I tried once, actually one of the mornings when I awoke at 3, thought, well, I'll get some sewing done. Guess what doesn't articulate at 45 degrees Fahrenheit or 7 degrees Celsius, 8 degrees Celsius. That's right, your fingers, they don't articulate very well. So no sewing for me in the freezing cold of the pre-dawn. Oh well, talk about talk about whinging. Otherwise, Pennsic, live chat keeps dropping out. Oh, thank you, Darius. He says my ball went great. Yeah, it did. It really was. It was honestly probably the best ball I've ever run at Pennsic, just hands down. It was phenomenal. The amount of great energy we had. So many new people I could tell who had never danced before, and they came to my red and gold ball and got their first ever dance experience, and people were really enjoying themselves. It was a pretty splendid time. So I guess it's kind of getting a reputation apparently from what people are telling me, already talking about their new red and gold outfits for next year. So I guess that means I should probably run another one next year. Yeah, hoity-toity dancing was great, except for the fact that the skies opened and it rained, which it wasn't supposed to do. The problem with that is it drove all the people who are out in the courtyards of Casa Barbici inside into the not very large hall where we were dancing, and so there stopped being very much room for dancing, which is really unfortunate. Which drove some of the advanced dancers to leave and go to bed or go elsewhere. But as soon as those dancers left, the rain stopped, it dried up, people left the hall, and we had plenty of room to continue dancing. Isn't that the way of it, though? Yeah. Let's see. I did not get to see very much fighting because, again, I was just kind of low energy this year. And also, it seemed that my classes were nearly always scheduled for noon, and so that meant that I had to, be at the dance pavilion by a certain time and be prepared. And so any pre-class preparation was happening when, the battles were happening anyway. So I hate to say this, everyone, I did not get any footage of the fighting this year at all. But, I'm confident that lots of people got footage. So as part of my Pennsic highlights, if there ends up being footage of fighting, it will be footage I borrowed or been given by other people, and I apologize for that. I did have a champion fight for me. I sponsored a champion for the Rose tournament, and it was his first ever Rose tournament, and that went really well. He was inspired, like literally inspired by me appointing him as my champion in that tournament. And that's sort of one of the beautiful things about being a Lady of the Rose, is that ability to inspire people. Wow, you would think I was walking through some kind of haunted house here. Why? There are never cars on this road. I don't understand. I picked this road on purpose. Oh. Hello, everyone. I'm taking a walk with you because I had ice cream earlier, and I really need to not be sitting down while the ice cream digests. Also, I don't usually eat things with refined sugar, so that ice cream is sitting like lead in my stomach, and I'm regretting my life choices right now. Anyway, back to Pennsic. So it was really great to sponsor my Lance Connect champion in the Rose tournament, and I did get to see one battle before I had to rush off to teach classic Casa Barbici, because the tournament that was supposed to start at 9, the first fight started at 10:45. So yeah, there is that. SCA time is a thing. There were actually very few of my favorite merchants were present at Pennsic this year, unfortunately, thinking about shopping. And that's because apparently there were a lot of health issues for a lot of my usual favorites. Wow, really? You know that the speed limit's 25, right? Not 60? Okay. No, none of you want to see me haggle drivers for their poor driving technique. Wow. Why is it? Like, literally, the lights were not on this part of the street. Of course they did. Anyway, now that you all think that I'm in some big commencement of some kind of haunted house horror movie, which, by the way, if you believe in that sort of thing, my hometown here, where I'm walking around now, lots of haunted houses. Question is, what is your favorite fruit from the Merchants or Cooper store? Favorite food? Cafe Merhaba. Cafe Merhaba. I love their baklava, especially their pistachio baklava. For those who don't know, Cafe Merhaba is it's a sort of Turkish style coffee house, and it's one of my favorite places to go. It has a lot of atmosphere. It's got lots of exotic throw pillows all about, and often have some really good live musicians just sort of twiddling away. And the baklava is definitely tasty. I do say I miss, when I started Pennsic 27 years ago, There was this place called Phil's Grill, and they had Greek food. They had like spanakopita and uh, souvlaki. That's the word I'm looking for. Souvlaki and tzatziki and all those yummy sort of Greek street food kind of things. And it also had some atmosphere with throw pillows. And I really loved Phil's Grill. And there was some kind of health code violation, so Phil's Grill lost its rights to sell then there, as far as I understand. And honestly, since then, there's been a kind of downward slump on the food vendors. I kind of wish there were actually like a tavern that actually sold medieval food. That would be great. Pennsic really lacks medieval food in the in its taverns, shall we say? Just maybe some nice medieval meat pies, maybe some medieval pottages. I'm not expecting a 12-course feast that involves swan, peacock, and pheasant, but I don't know. Something that's not hamburgers, French fries, and barbecue would be great. Yeah. Anyway, favorite merchants. I love the Potter in Oakwood Hall. There's actually, for those who don't know, Oakwood Hall is this. Wow, it is really not normally this dark here. I feel like this live stream is cursed somehow. For those who don't know, it's crazy. I don't understand what's going on tonight. For those who don't know, Oakwood Hall is this Tudor building that they set up in the merchant area every year. And, wow, how on earth? Anyway, and there is a potter inside. There's several potters, but one of the potters actually does reproduction medieval English pottery, and he makes a lot of it right there on site. And not only that, they build a furnace, they build a kiln out at the edge of the Serengeti using materials on site, and they fire the pottery there, right there on site. And they even sometimes, this year at least, they went and they dug up clay, Pennsic clay, and made pottery from Pennsic clay that they then also sold. That was really interesting, but also you could say that the caliber of clay available at Cooper's Lake is not the same as the caliber of clay that is harvested from other areas. See, I am here. It's not just the darkness. Wow. So yeah, I love that pottery place, and that man really knows his stuff, and he has catalogs of medieval pieces that they copy, but he also actually has extant medieval pieces of pottery with him, so you can go and actually touch real medieval pottery at Oakwood Hall, which is pretty splendid. And he has really fun things, like he always has at least one drippings pan for when you're doing a rotisserie roast. You put this drippings pan underneath of it, and it catches all of those yummy drippings, and it prevents fire spatter. But then you can also keep the drippings to make a gravy out of from your spit roast. By the way, spit boy was one of the least desirable positions in any kitchen, and I know that sounds like a really tittle-hating job, but it's not. It's literally the poor boy or man who just sits there and turns the spit by hand for hours on end, kind of next to the heat of that awful fire. So yeah, but having the drippings pan is pretty cool, and I've always wanted one, but I don't have a spit roast anymore, and I don't even have a yard right now in which I could spit roast, so it seemed like a really frivolous purchase to hire a drippings pan for the eventuality that light just went out. I don't understand what's going on tonight. My cursed walk, I guess. But he also had a colander, like a clay pottery colander, and some other really neat sort of daily use items. Oh, a little stove where you put coals underneath of it, and then you put the bowl on top of the stove. He had a curfew as well, and for those who don't know, a curfew is actually literally means like to cut the fire, a corfu, and you literally, it's a dome that you put on top of your fire, so that you keep the embers going, so that the next morning when you want to restart the fire, you can just restart it from the embers. So they're also made out of clay so that they don't catch on fire themselves. Let's see, the comment is, hold on a minute, back to the merchants thing. It would be nice if they could set up some type of clock mechanism to keep it spinning. Oh yeah, with weights, yeah. So they're talking about the spit. So, actually, by the 15th century, they had developed a turbine system to keep the spit spinning using the rising heat from the fire. So, an actual fan that caught the heat from the fire, and then with all the cogs and everything caused the spit to turn. So yeah, they actually had that by the 15th century at the latest. There's actually woodcuts of it showing medieval kitchens, 15th century kitchens, with this neat little clockwork thing. Yeah, cog system tied to a turbine. Yeah, medieval people definitely had some sophisticated technology. But obviously you had to live in a place where you had a craftsman who could build and design that. It obviously required precision. The blades of the fan had to be angled in just the right way, etc., etc. So not everyone had that system. And in many cases, it was probably cheaper just to hire a person to do the job than it was to actually have that kind of sophisticated machinery do it. When materials are expensive and human resources are cheap, that's what you get. Yeah. Be pretty cool to have one of those at Pennsic, though, especially. Just have that set up in camp doing its thing while you go off and do other things. I mean, okay, obviously, you shouldn't just leave a fire burning in camp and go off and do other things, so you should still have someone monitoring it, but still, it's a neat idea. Just an idea. Let's see. Other cool merchants at Pennsic. Oh, there are a couple of furniture makers who make some really nice things. Dupuis Creations makes some really cool things, and someone actually asked about, I think it was probably shown in my Midnight Madness video, Walkabout. They actually have these fun sort of pendant dragons. They're hanging wooden dragons, and when you pull on a string on the bottom, the wings flap. They're pretty big wooden dragons, actually. Pretty nice, painted by hand, carved by hand. Sartor wasn't there this year. But for that, Armor and Castings was there this year, and they are, in fact, my only non-Patreon sponsor, actually. Once again, there's a light right there and it's not on. I don't understand what's going on. I mean, it looks like it's brighter in the cemetery that's right off to my left with all the creepy little candles burning at night and flickering in the darkness. Anyway, Butterfly, back to the live stream. So Dupuis Creations is really nice. Boots by Bohemond wasn't there this year. He apparently some health issues. Raymond's Quiet Press wasn't there this year. So Armor and Castings was there. I got to meet them in person. They're really neat. And they were actually vending. You could actually buy Armor and Castings items from TLC Leather, the leather something or other. Anyway, you could buy things from them. Right there, their fun badges, and of course their beautiful Domitian belts. Those are I don't understand what's going on with the lighting here today. The Domitian belts, those are the ones that are around the hips that you often see me in my kirtles. You could also buy some other belt fittings, 13th, 14th century belt fittings, and they would make them right there because TLC Leather is actually the person who sold me the leather for that big wide belt that I made for my Burgundian gowns that everyone loves so much. So that's kind of funny. That was not planned at all. But because he is the leather, they would actually assemble the belts right there for you. So you didn't just buy the fittings and then pray someday that you actually got around to making a belt. They would make the belt there for you. So that was pretty neat. Let's see. There were some very good fabric merchants. There's some good cloth ones, cloth merchants like Calico, Carolina Calicos, I think. They're usually a good place to get some pretty affordable linen and silk. That's in fact where I got the heavy linen canvas ticking for my straw mattress. I bought it last year, but used it again this year and will continue using it until it goes threadbare. Let's see. Now, granted, I didn't get everywhere this year because somehow, even though I was teaching fewer classes, I think, I still feel like I was always busy somehow. It seemed I was doing laundry a lot anyway in camp. Of course, some of you may have seen the video of me doing laundry. Tip for Pennsic: do not drink the water. Do not use it to wash your skin. Do not use it to wash your hair if you can avoid it. It will dry the hell out of your skin and hair. It will stain your clothing, even the filtered stuff, because especially if the filters are not fresh, There's so much iron in the water because that area used to be a coal mine that the soil is completely polluted with the remnants of that process. And so the water will turn orange. The iron in it will oxidize like in seconds. And that orange rust will stain your clothing. I once washed a smock in a bucket, a wooden bucket, and I'm so proud of myself. It was my first medieval laundering experience. It felt so authentic and so lovely. And in horror, I watched as my white smock with just a few little dirt stains turned into an orange smock with no dirt stains. So that's how much iron there is. Oh, good, spider webs, that's fun. That's how much iron there is in the Pennsic water. So, yeah, if you are, I don't understand. It was so bright here last night. I took a walk just to scout the route, and it's now like half the lights in the town have just decided to turn off just because, and there are cars everywhere, whereas normally they're not. I don't get it. Well, either way, I guess you all can still hear me talking. Hopefully. Yeah, so the water here, and not here, in Pennsic, Cooper's Lake water will absolutely turn your things orange, and it will dry your hair and skin out, and it will cause your hair to break and your skin to start, flaking. So I recommend buying lots of bottled water. Costco in Cranberry, which is down south, has big, huge boxes of, big, huge, it's an exaggeration. They have boxes of 6-gallon jugs of spring water, Deer Park spring water, for pretty damn inexpensive. And we use that for everything, for washing ourselves, our dishes, our clothes. Yes, it's more expensive. I don't like the added plastic waste, but the water there is really very just unpotable, in my opinion. Even though it's not going to kill you, it's not good for anything, except for, I guess, if you're anemic, then maybe it's bioaccessible, the iron in the water. I'm not certain about that. But there's a lot of it. So yeah, big Pennsic tip, bring your own water, or bring a really excellent filtration system like quadruple filtration and change the filters every couple of days. You can really, especially in the dance pavilion, of course it's below central here tonight on a late Sunday night when everyone should already be home and in bed. Anyway, in the dance pavilion, for instance, we have water coolers, and they are filled from the central water point up near the EMT station, and there's a quadruple, I think it's triple at least, possibly quadruple filter system there. The beginning of Pennsic, it tastes fine. By the end of Pennsic, you can pretty much taste the iron shining through. And that's because I don't think they change the filters during the event, whereas they should probably change them every couple of days, considering the kind of abuse that they take. In fact, I know one gentleman who he took a shower in his camp shower, and they didn't have filters on the camp shower, and he turned orange. I watched it. I saw this with my own eyes. He turned orange. And then he tried to go into one of the Cooper's Lake showers to rinse off the orange, and it turned him brown. So, yeah, like I said, the water has a pretty high iron content. So I did not shower at all. I sponge bathed every single night before going to bed. My whole body, believe it or not, I know this is going to come shocking, you don't have to shower to be clean. Crazy talk, right? But, for literally millennia and eons, humans have managed to stay clean without showers. So you don't need a shower to be clean, and you definitely don't need a shower in Pennsic water to be clean unless you really like that orange tint to your skin and the lovely eau de toilette of iron, wafting from your freshly washed skin. Let's see. Thoughts about Pennsic. So this was the first year we ran my own encampment at Pennsic. I've led and organized medieval encampments at other events, but never for 2 weeks. So there are some things that I forgot, and we'll definitely be doing next year. Yeah, someone just commented, yeah, definitely tasted the difference between the water in the dance pavilion between the beginning and the end. No idea what was going on. Well, that's it. The water filters just gave out. So that's a thing. If I set up my own camp next year, I will definitely probably be bringing a filtration system for the water point. And that that feeds our camp, and therefore we will have filtered water for, if maybe we don't drink it, at the very least we will use the filtered water for cleaning of things like bodies and clothing. Maybe clothing, maybe not. I might bring a scrap of white linen and see what happens, because for the most part the things I'm washing at Pennsic are my white linens, my stockings, which are not white, and that's it. My dresses, I don't really wash at Pennsic, although I mean, I don't wash most of my dresses per se anyway. I just sort of soak them in a tub to get the dust out, which usually leaves my tubs gray or black. And then just sort of rinse them hanging to rinse out all of the dust that they collect from dragging across the ground as I waft along in true Contessa style. But at Pennsic, definitely my white linens, my underthings, which are all white linen, get washed on a pretty regular basis because, surprise, surprise, I don't have 14 smocks to make sure I have a fresh one for each day without laundering them. So it's good to have water that doesn't turn your linens orange or brown or any shade. Oh, speaking of which, some of you may have been following the saga of the smock, the stained smock. And when last we left off, I believe you all knew that the smock had ended. I mean, if you're wondering about that, you can go see my video on live doing medieval laundry and hear the full tale. In essence, this poor thing has just been getting stained and stained and stained and is not even finished yet. I haven't finished making it yet, and it's already super stained. So after soaking it, pulling the pins out of it, and soaking it again to get the corrosion stains out of it, and using lemon juice, scrubbing it with a cut lemon in all the spots to make sure that there's extra bleaching action, and laying it out in the sun, the next day I pulled it off of the benches on which we laid it, and it was brown. It was brown. It was tan. It had tan stains all over it. Well, ladies and gentlemen, if you make benches and you varnish them, they need longer than a week to cure. Varnish is the wrong word. Stain them. Definitely not varnish. Stain them. They apparently need longer than a week to cure. So the benches were pretty newly made and had only been cured for about a week. And the lemon juice and vinegar that was probably remnant in the smock caused it to come off of the wood and adhere to the white smock. So now this poor smock had tan stains and brown stains all over it, instead of the oil stains and red dye stains and the corrosion stains and the Pennsic mud stains and the Pennsic grass stains. So I had to soak it again. More lemon juice, more scrubbing, more soap, more soaking, more vinegar. And finally, ladies and gentlemen, that poor smock no longer has stains on it. They all seem to have come out. It's actually almost finished. It'll probably be done in time to wear when I go to Thailand for an SCA event in the first weekend in October. So yay, I seem to have salvaged the smock after a lot of heartache. But we'll see. The smock seems cursed. So I'm about to fly home to Korea via Ethiopia. So God knows what might happen to it. It might spill over my bags. What the luggage trolls might do with it, who knows? And for those of you who do not know what luggage trolls are, be happy. It means your luggage hasn't been handled by them. Let's see. The full moon at Pennsic was stunning. Really created some truly magical moments. I will say, so one thing I'm going to complain about a little bit. There was so much pot smoke at this Pennsic. It was unbearable for me. I do badly with cigarette smoke. I do super badly with pot smoke. I think I must be allergic. It seems like the wrong word, but I react to it, and badly. And everywhere we walked, there was pot smoke. I went through the marketplace on Midnight Madness, and there were these two brazen girls sitting right next to a merchant's booth in one of the main streets, just puffing away. And it smelled like someone had hit 20 skunks and left them to fester on the side of the road. And I feel like it's very inconsiderate to just smoke that way when there's so many people who are sensitive to it. And it's, I have no problem with people want to do for themselves, to themselves, with themselves, more power to them. What I object to is when it affects me directly and negatively. Like if you force your choices on me, that's not fair and that's not considerate. So, if you're looking for the effects, there are edibles that don't affect other people. And I know I'm not the only person who thought there was way too much pot smoking happening. And especially in our camp where we were in this weird microclimate where the air did not circulate in the least. Starting at 9 a.m., there was pot smoke in our camp. And it didn't go anywhere for like 20 minutes. It took 20 or 30 minutes for it to disperse. And we even talked to our neighbors and we asked if we could work out something whereby we would let them know when we're out of camp, because we spend a lot of time out of camp. And then they could, do what they wanted then, and we would let them know when they're back. But they refused to actually sort of meet us in any kind of respectful way. Yeah, I know this might get me some hate in the comments, but really, it's not considerate to force your choices on others that way. Especially when it can impact their health. One of my campmates gets blinding migraines if she inhales too much pot smoke, right? Blinding. I don't mean, oh, my head hurts. I mean on the ground, sobbing and praying for sweet death. I have one of my other apprentices, she literally vomits if she inhales too much. And too much is not as much as you think it is. So that's just it's not on. And I actually went, right. Comment is, I'm allergic to hemp, so the smoke is a life threat for me. Yeah, you're not the only one. Lots of people are. And I know because they've said so in other fora. And I just feel like would be nice if there could be some consideration for how one's choices like that impact other people. Like I said, you don't have to smoke if it's the effect. Plenty of edibles. And I think what really frustrated me is I went to I stop breathing if I inhale marijuana smoke. There you go. For me, it's just extremely unpleasant. And I just really hate life for a little while, but at least I don't stop breathing. So that's pretty terrible. I went to the powers that be, and I literally went to security and said, I don't know to whom I need to report this, but I need to report it. And I know for a fact, I double checked, it's still illegal in Pennsylvania for recreational pot. And they literally, the powers that be came back to me and said, well, medical marijuana is legal, and because recreational marijuana is on its way to being legal, we can't do anything about it. And I'm like, but it's not legal yet, so you can do something about it. And I do believe that in the Pennsic pre-registration materials, it was made very clear that recreational pot smoking would not be tolerated or allowed, and yet it was tolerated. And so I'm pretty frustrated by that, actually. I feel like that was a disservice to all of us who don't want to breathe it. And I know people who, if they get too much in their blood, and someone came up, I heard someone say this bullshit thing, oh, if you breathe secondhand pot smoke, you can't test positive for it. Bullshit. There is no difference between secondhand and firsthand pot smoke. Let's be clear about this. Breathing it in is breathing it in. It ends up in your blood, it ends up in your hair. And if you are in the military, or you're at jobs where they test for that, and you've inhaled enough of it, then you're going to pop positive, and you're going to either end up at Fort Leavenworth or losing your job. So yeah, that's not cool. Okay, rant off. But if you feel like I do, then I suggest writing to the BOD and writing to the Pennsic management team. It's just, yeah, if we don't say anything to people in positions of power, then we can't really complain about it, because just complaining about it is useless. So I have said something, and I do plan on actually maybe drawing up a petition, but at the very least writing my own letters as soon as I get back to the land of the morning calm. So that was a big downside of Pennsic this year. On the positive side, as I mentioned, the weather was exquisite. I really enjoyed being with my household. This is the first time I've camped not with Drachenwald, and I have to say I really missed camping with Drachenwald so much. I miss my Drachenwald peeps. I miss living in Drachenwald. It's a great kingdom. The people there are great. The people who camp at Pennsic there are great. But because the kingdom doesn't have a populous camp, and the kingdom camp itself is pretty damn tiny, the rule is justifiably so that to camp there you have to either be a royal peer, or you have to a royal peer of Drachenwald, or you have to be currently living in the kingdom. Well, I have 2 apprentices in the kingdom. The rest of my apprentices, I have quite a few actually, don't live in Drachenwald. So if I want to camp with my people, with my retainers, with my apprentices, with my men and ladies at arms, with my household, then unfortunately I can't camp with my kingdom. So this was the first year I started my own household camp, Belfiore. And it actually, it was great camping with my non-Drachenwald people. Downside is we still have to figure out about infrastructure and what's actually needed. And so there'll be a big post-mortem meeting where we probably say things like, well, we need to have more tables. We need 2 buckets instead of 1 bucket. 1 bucket for dishes, 1 bucket for laundry. Probably we'll actually need a chore chart so that it's not the same people always kind of getting stuck. I would say also we had like 5 larders. Sorry, that's the medieval word we were using. We had 5 coolers. And of course there's a fire. Oh, yeah. Sorry, everyone. That's a fire siren. It's at least a 2 alarmer. Yeah. That's right. It's a small town where they still use fire sirens to call the fire company. Welcome to Milford, Delaware. Population 6,000. Sorry about that. Don't worry. It's just a fire. It's not an air raid siren. Oh my God. Okay, it's a big one too. It's probably going to be a 5 alarmer. Well, welcome to my childhood. Literally, this is how I grew up, with fire sirens, usually about once a night, actually, now that I think about it. Oh, God. It's a pretty bad one, actually. Over down this street. Yes, okay. Sirens are done. I am in my hometown. Yeah, this is my home, no, but this is where I grew up. This is Milford, Delaware. This is where the Contessa spent her formative years. A very historic sort of colonial town that had a shipbuilding industry up until the last white oak was felled in the 1940s, and they could no longer build ships here. And there's a lot of, I actually just, oh yeah, exactly. No, the fire sirens work here. They work great. That's a part of the soundtrack of my childhood, actually, that you all just heard. Yeah, and I just produced a video this morning, a short video. It's on my travel channel, I think, about some of the historic homes here in town, which I know by European standards aren't that old, but by American standards, we actually have some homes here that are several hundred years old. Yeah, there have been things here since the 17th century, actually. Like real things, not just random things. What is that? I don't know what that is. Interesting. Let's see. Other thoughts about Pennsic? Yeah, are there any questions? Does anyone have any comments or questions in particular? Yeah, I have to say that jet lag really impacted me a lot this year, or whatever the hell is going on, my insomnia. It definitely kept me from staying up later. I didn't really get to go slum it in the bog as I sometimes do, just to amuse myself in full finery, to go down amongst the reveling masses in the swampy parts. And I hardly got to dance in the evening either, because like I said, by 9 or 10 o'clock I was wavering on my feet. What is the average amount of money spent to go and spend 2 weeks there? Haha. Okay, well, depends on the kind of life you lead at Pennsic. What is the average amount of money to go for 2 weeks? So the cost of the event is $240 for 2 weeks, just the entry fee. And then it sort of depends on whether you're part of a camp with an organized meal plan, with organized camp fees. I will say that, it depends on how high on the hog you want to live, right? If you are fine with eating ramen noodles for every meal, prepared on your camp stove, you can probably get away with $10, $15 a day for food. And if you unwisely drink the water from the faucet here, the filtered or unfiltered water, then you can maybe even get away with less because you don't have to buy yourself, several jugs of water every day. But I would say that really more realistically, for a meal, especially if you're in a camp with a meal plan, you're probably looking at, you know, depending on the camp you're with, if you're with a good camp, they'll have camp fees, so usually maybe $100 a week, because camp fees include things like infrastructure, communal pavilions, water, soap, all those supplies you need for a good camp. So probably $100 a week, so $200 in camp fees in addition to your your entry fee. And then some camps, have a meal plan for $10 to $15 a day for 2 meals, not necessarily 3 meals, but 2 meals a day. So, that's $240 plus 200 is $440 for the camp fees. Say another $150 for the meal plan, but that still leaves you with lunch. So that's $550. Lunch, you could get a cooler and just have some lunch meats and cheeses and cucumbers, pickles, that kind of thing. So you can do it as cheaply as you want, or you can do it as expensively as you want. I guess it's a hard question to answer. If you really want to shoestring it and you camp in singles camping by yourself, so no camp fees, no meal plan, and you're eating, lunch meat, cheese, and ramen every day, then you can probably get away with, $10, $15 a day. Probably. But you might you might feel a little nutritionally unbalanced by the end of that. You might feel not so great. It's not necessarily, it's like any camping thing. You can make it as cheap as you want. If you eat out, I know people who eat out at the food merchants 3 meals a day, and that's easily $60 a day for food at the food vendors. So kind of depends on what you want to do. Yeah. Sorry, I gotta go back to the chat. In my camp, the question was, were you all attempting as medieval as possible? In our camp, we were, considering our relatively limited what we had for supplies for this year. We were attempting to go as medievally as possible. There are some of the fire company trucks, on their way to the fire station. We were attempting to be as medieval as possible, but there were only 5 of us, and most of my things, my medieval living history encampment things, see if I can not die crossing the street. I'm in a crosswalk, well lit, should be fine. Hopefully this won't be my death, my own eulogy. Anyway, all of my medieval living history stuff is in storage. My camping stuff. It's all in storage because of being military and the situation in which we find ourselves. So I don't have any of my really hardcore setup with me or accessible. So we didn't have the kind of supplies I usually have. I have in the past done, you light your fire using a flint steel, and you cook over the fire for every single meal, or you just take from your larder for every single meal, and everything is prepared there, fresh. We didn't have those kind of resources for this event. We didn't have the numbers, because here's the reality about medieval living. Medieval living was communal, and it required a lot of people to pull it off. There were no hermits were considered odd for a reason. And it's because you really couldn't survive well on your own. You needed a whole household of people to keep the household functioning, to do all of the things that for which we now use appliances, right? Those used to be people doing those tasks. So what that means is, because I have a very busy schedule of teaching dance and classes and leading balls and walking around and enjoying life at Pennsic, we don't have time to just stay in camp and do the thing all day, every day. I've done that. I have done living history events where I never left my camp, because starting in the morning until late at night, I was just managing a fire and cooking over the fire and preparing food and cleaning up and blah, blah, blah. Been there, done that. That's not how I wanted Pennsic to be. If I had a larger camp and I had a dedicated kitchen staff who really just loved just being at the kitchen and doing their thing, then we probably would have had an even more authentic experience. But as is, we did cheat. For instance, we had matches to start to light the oil lamps at night. Reproduction oil lamps, mind you, with olive oil as the fuel. And, all the equipment was more or less authentic, but we just didn't necessarily use 100% authentic techniques because, again, that actually requires a lot of people and a lot of effort that at Pennsic we just don't. We want to do other things. If I had my traveling household of 100 servants and all the various levels, oh good, it's getting creepy and dark again, on all the various levels, then yeah, we could have done even more authentic. But again, also a lot of my equipment for that is in storage somewhere. So my roasting spit, it's in storage. My medieval pots, they're in storage. Let's see, my medieval cooking equipment, like bowls and all of that, long-handled wooden spoons, frying pans, all of that's in storage. My cheese press is in storage. Because yeah, I can make cheese and I love making cheese, but my medieval cheese press is in storage. So, all I have at Pennsic actually is just what you see at Pennsic. That's my travel setup. That's my secondary setup. You should see my full setup. I wish I could see my full setup, but it's in storage. And it will be in storage for the foreseeable future. So yes, we do try to do things as authentically as possible, but there are certain constraints, i.e. human resources, big one. And the desire to do other things at a festival such as Pennsic than just cook all day, every day. Yeah, so we did cheat. We tried to do foodstuffs that were medieval. Like we actually bought pre-made kibbeh from Costco, which are basically these lovely little medieval meat pies that are just really great. Unfortunately, because we had so many larders and they were so badly organized, we actually lost track of some of our best food that we had bought, and it went bad. But here's the funny thing. We threw the kibbeh out and the next morning some critter had come through the trash, opened up the packages of kibbeh, taken a bite out of every single little pie, and discarded it, hoping that the next one would not be rancid. Pretty certain it had to have been a raccoon, something with opposable thumbs. But I could almost feel the frustration in the bite marks, the bites taken out of each of the kibbeh pies. That was pretty funny. The moral of that story, though, is, I should have thought of this. If you throw food out, take it to the trash, the dumpster immediately. Don't wait until the next morning when something may have raided your midden and scattered it all over the place, as in our case. Yeah, so yeah, we definitely tried to keep it, the food stuffs that we purchased, as authentic as possible. Given that I'm coming from Korea, I have fewer options in that regard. So I have to, cheat on the pre-made. I don't have the option of, doing mass cooking, freezing, and then bringing it with me. That doesn't work when you're flying 35 hours via Abu Dhabi. Also, they can get cranky at borders if you start bringing in lots of foodstuffs that are forbidden. Yeah, so we do try to be authentic. There are limitations on what I can do in my current living/travel circumstances. Yeah. It's, authenticity at that level. Like I said, it takes a village, and that's not a metaphor. Yeah, it's a good question, actually. I hope that answer was what you wanted to hear, and not. So let's see. Question was, is professionally made garb allowed? I'm a courtier. Oh yeah, no. Mm-hmm. Yes, there are. So Pennsic is an event of the Society for Creative Anachronism. And while hypothetically the rules there should apply, they are not enforced. But even still, the rules of the Society for Creative Anachronism as concerns clothing are an attempt at pre-1600 clothing. The bar is intentionally low because we hope that through encouragement people will join at no matter their socioeconomic level, and then grow and learn and improve their kit as they go along. Unfortunately, Many people abuse that rule and don't really ever progress past something that they know is not right or even vaguely right. And Pennsic especially is not really an SCA event anymore in many ways. It's, I would say, at least 30% of the attendees are not medievalists at all. They are literally just coming to dress like Pirates of the Caribbean, pirates, etc., and have a good party down in the bog. So yes, professionally made clothing is absolutely allowed. In fact, would be probably more appropriate than what a large portion of the population is wearing. Yeah, so if you recreate historical museum pieces, that's fine. Absolutely fine. And wonderful. Wonderful, splendid, perfect. Yep. Oh, wait. Sorry. Hold on a minute. Someone just commented. I was at Pennsic and loved it. I did eat out at the Beast and Boar and Medieval Munchies. I purchased the mug for drinks. My camp was not the greatest, but it was satisfactory for my immersed Pennsic. And that is awesome. I'm really glad you had a great time. Yeah, the mugs. The mugs are a good idea for staying hydrated. Also for sustainability. So for those who don't know, there are 2 restaurants, at least 2 restaurants, maybe more, food vendors in the merchant area who offer a sort of, it's usually a pottery mug, I think. Anyway, it's a mug you can buy. It's their own branded mug. And if you buy that mug, you get unlimited drink refills. They have like lemonade and iced tea. So you can, as long as you have that, every time you pass by, you can refill it and thereby stay hydrated, which is really important at Pennsic because even on the cooler days, dehydration is a thing that happens. So having a way to prevent that is not a bad thing. Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of the Beast and Boar. Is okay. I'll be honest, I'm a foodie. I'm a total foodie, and I have really high standards for food, and I understand that I'm not normal. So asking me about food can sometimes not get an answer that would actually be what most people think. Yeah, I'm super picky about what I put in my body. Yeah, and I just admitted to eating ice cream earlier, and now I feel like crap about it. But that's pretty cool. There was another comment from Sean. Sean says, I spent about $1,100 for garment archery equipment. So Sean, did you spend that at the event or in anticipation of the event? That's an interesting point. Now, and that's another point. How much can you spend at Pennsic? Well, that is a bottomless well, my friend. Yeah, so apparently the $1,100 that the good Sean spent was at the event. Yeah, you can spend a lot at Pennsic, really. Let's see. You should make video about the food. Comment was, you should make a video about food and maybe make a few things that we can see. Oh, about food. Oh, medieval food, you mean? Yeah, I actually do have, I have a 2-part video, and actually I think I made a supercut on a dish called aloes de mutton, which is actually what are now lamb olives in modern English. If you ever wondered what the origin, why meat rolls are called olives, it's because it actually comes from the French word aloes, and it's kind of been corrupted over time in English to be olives. But I did a video, 2-part video on actually reconstructing a early 15th century English recipe from a form of curry for lamb or mutton rolls, actually. And I actually go through and provide the Middle English, yeah, provide the Middle English and actually kind of explore the process of reconstructing a recipe, the considerations you have to make, etc., etc., and then we reconstruct the recipe together and experiment with different techniques. So I actually do have one video on that, but I know that food videos are pretty popular, so I probably will be doing some other ones. And maybe we'll just do a creative Contessa medieval food cook-along for those who want to just watch the full process to see. Yeah, medieval food was super interesting and sophisticated and varied. The spice palette was just so much more complex than the modern European spice palette. And for those who don't know, that is thanks to Louis XIV, mostly, who in the second half of his life became very ascetic, almost as like a counter reaction to the debauchery and excess of his youth. And when his palate simplified and his cooks started cooking all this really simplified food, what's called la nouvelle cuisine, cooks throughout Europe started imitating that. Courts throughout Europe started imitating that. And then when the French Revolution happened and all of the cooks for all of those great households were sort of, well, unemployed and also possibly up for the guillotine, they fled to other parts of Europe and opened restaurants. And that is why French cuisine is now like the foundation of so much of the haute cuisine. But also why, if you think about it, it's relatively simple in the flavor palette. Whereas medieval food was, high-end medieval food, obviously. Your average peasant couldn't afford, exotic spices imported from Malabar or Malacca. Malabar too, I guess. So, your average medieval recipe will have grains of paradise and cinnamon and ginger and galangal and long pepper and, all these great flavor givers, cumin even, all these great flavor givers that now people associate with South Asian cuisine, with Indian curry, with Sri Lankan curry, with Thai cuisine, with Indonesian cuisine. But that is how high-end medieval food was, actually. It was very flavorful, very rich, lots of savory and sweet combinations, sour, acid, like really lots of different profiles, different flavor profiles. Fruit and meat combined. The idea of dessert was not really codified the way it is for us. They would just as likely to serve a sweet thing in the middle of a course of savory things. Yeah. So I think maybe more videos on medieval food might be of interest. Certainly, I love cooking. I love food. So yeah. Let's see. you evil Frenchies. Yeah. I know. Evil Frenchies. Let's see. Really, I hate how the chat disappears even though I keep pressing it. I went to an SCA event about 25 years ago. The food was so bad that everyone, I wonder if that was the same event I attended. Yeah, there was an event I went to down in somewhere in Virginia, and the food really was terrible. It was really bad. And yeah, we did end up going to, we didn't go to a McDonald's, but afterwards we went somewhere. I think we went to a diner. We found a 24-hour diner and ate there. I will say that living in Drachenwald, which is Europe, it spoiled me, really spoiled me for food, because the feasts there are always, the food there, the feasts, the lunches, the dinners, they're always so excellent that I grew accustomed to that being the standard for cuisine, and unfortunately that isn't actually the standard in a lot of places. I mean, you have to understand that in the Society for Creative Anachronism, these are volunteers, right? They're not getting paid to do all this cooking. They're not caterers. They're not getting paid to do the work. They're not getting paid to be trained professionally. So in a lot of cases, it's learning by doing. And the consequences of that can be excellent, or it can be adventuresome. But I think it's important to be grateful in any case for these people who generally, work their asses off to try to do something. Even if they fail, at least they tried. I know that doesn't help when you're hungry, but the alternative is paying professional catering companies to do this. And I'll tell you, I recently had a professionally catered feast, and it was not much of a feast, and it was not very good. So even having professional caterers try to do medieval food might not actually work out either, apparently. Yeah, but I've been spoiled with good food when it comes to medieval food. Darius, my friend David Learmonth, says, I've seldom had a bad feast, sometimes a bad dish. Well, that's great. So maybe Eldermere also has the same situation. Eldermere, for those who don't know, is kind of like the central provinces of Canada, Ontario, sort of that area. So yeah, I mean, that's great if you also have a pretty strong, oh goodness, I've got people fighting over there. I'm going to walk this way. It's great if you have a strong cooking team. You know, it really does take a lot of effort. To cook for a lot of people is a special skill. Is it just Ontario? Okay. It really does. It's a special skill to, you know, people who can cook a dinner for 6, it's not the same skill as a dinner for 150. And it's certainly not the same skill as a multi-course dinner for 150. Yeah, so, you know, there's a learning curve there. And in the SCA especially, we're kind of spoiled because we expect a lot of what would normally be really expensive services to be for free. And I think sometimes we lose sight of that and we're not as appreciative of the efforts as we should be when they are provided. Yeah. Oh, you're curious about my feast, as in the feast I've made or the feast of Drachenwald? Yeah. Feasts I've made. I think the most I've ever cooked for myself is 50. Europe. Yeah, they're splendid. And in fact, we had a feast once where it was during Lent, and they actually offered people the option of having a Lenten feast, of Lenten options on the feast, and, you know, being as really authentic about it. But for people who don't like fish and that sort of thing, they offered alternative dishes, and that was pretty neat. I mean, it's not something I would necessarily want to eat for 40 days and 40 nights, you know, going entirely without land mammal. But it was an interesting experience for a feast. Yeah, the feasts in Europe, in Drachenwald, tend to be very well researched and good, hot, plentiful, tasty, which I guess is good. Tasty is good, yeah. Which, you know, is pretty nice. And yeah, there's some people who even go to the effort of, you know, like doing little readings in between the courses from books of manners. For example, there's a book of etiquette from the 15th century, there's several books of etiquette, the Book of Caring and some other ones, the baby's book, and you can actually get an idea of both proper table manners from the 15th century, but also the kind of crap that people were doing at the table, which was just absolutely disgusting. For instance, there's one rule in the baby's book that says that you should spit over your shoulder backwards rather than forwards over the table. I'm like, oh God, really? That's the good etiquette? Okay. Oh boy, fun. And other disgusting things. Let's see. What's your favorite dish that you've made for a feast? Ooh. Favorite dish that I have made for a feast. I have to say, I really love meat pies. In general, meat and egg pies of various kinds. But one of the favorite things I've done is I think in general is a lamb roast, which, you know, okay, that seems simple enough, but with dipping sauces. There's this great sauce from, I think it's the Neapolitan recipe collection, 15th century Italian recipes, and there's this thing called Saracen sauce. And Saracen sauce turns out to be basically like a walnut and garlic pesto, where you just pound the living God out of walnuts and garlic together, and you mix some breadcrumbs. Because I generally avoid bread, I actually don't mix the breadcrumbs in. But if you add the breadcrumbs and you add a little bit of liquid, you get more of a sauce and less of a pesto. Anyway, super delicious on anything, including meat. And then there's this green sauce recipe in there that's actually very much like, it's like a vinegar. It's you can see the green sauce is very much like a mint sauce that you would get in the United Kingdom to go with lamb. It's vinegary, it's bright because of all these green herbs, and it just makes such a delightful counterpoint to the musty sweetness of the lamb, if that makes sense. I think that might be one of my favorite dishes that I've made is you know, roast lamb, which it probably would be more likely roast mutton in period, honestly. But good luck trying to find mutton. These days, it's not easy depending on where you live, so lamb is much more easy. But roast lamb with dipping sauces, good stuff. And relevant to Pennsic, that is a trick you could do, actually. Oh yeah, I've actually grown sorrel get to sorrel in a moment. For Pennsic, that is something you can do. One of the dishes that does actually cook up really well in advance, you can roast lamb, make up the sauces, freeze everything, put it in the larder, and then as it defrosts, you eat it. And roast lamb is great cold or hot, so you don't even need to reheat it. And then you have your dipping sauces. And so that you can have lunch off of that for days. Also, aloes de mutton or aloes de beef, those meat rolls, those cook up in advance super well. They freeze super well, they defrost super well, and they're just as good. You know, they're also good cold. You don't have to eat them hot for them to be tasty. Sorrel. I have a question was, have I tried sorrel? Yes, I have grown sorrel, and I have used it in a salad of herbes, which is, you know, a 15th century salad recipe. I like it because it has a bitter, astringent taste that really, it's refreshing, especially in a dressing of vinegar and olive oil with all the other herbes that one might have with that, like sage and burnet and rocket and some other things. So yeah, I have grown sorrel and I've eaten sorrel and I like sorrel. It's very sharp for the modern palate though, because medieval salad greens are not lettuce, not like we understand them. Salads tended to be herbs, the leaves from herbs, and so it's a much more pungent, but therefore much more nutrient dense dish. A good medieval salad is, because all those little leaves are super packed with all kinds of vitamins, and so really that would have been a really excellent way to get the kind of micronutrients, the vitamins, the minerals that you would need in your diet to function well as a human. Would have been a good herb salad, and much more nutritionally dense and functional than modern lettuces are for the most part. Yeah, so a salad of herbis is also a really good thing. Oh, that's something I love making, caudel. Caudel is basically an egg custard, a wine egg custard. You take sweet wine, you cook it down, you add egg yolks, whisk egg yolks into it, and cook it until it's thick. And you can add some rose water to it, which really has a lovely flavor. And that just makes, you can eat it plain just by the bowlful, or you can pour it over fruit. Also another combination is caudel with snow, and snow is basically a cream egg white mixture where you make it into, it's like whipped cream but with egg whites, and caudel with snow on top. Oh, so good. So very, very good. And you can find caudel in all the, basically, I think in the German cookbooks as well. All the cookbooks I've read from the 15th century, 14th, 15th century have some version of caudel in them. So it seems to be a pretty pan-European idea of sweet wine, egg yolks, make a custard, eat it as a sauce, eat it plain, serve it forth, sort of. The Italian name for it is, crap. It's actually, they have it still in Italy, and the word is completely escaping me at the moment. It starts with a Z. Darn it. Anyway, there still exists a dish that still exists in modern Italy, and it's still eaten to this day. So I really love it when I find medieval dishes that have survived more or less unaltered to the modern day. That's pretty exciting to me. Yeah. Somehow we've veered onto the topic of food, which kind of ties to Pennsic as well. Let me see. I watched them chop up and strain the juice. Ah, yes, sorrel juice. Yeah, you can do that. So that's another thing that was done actually commonly in medieval cooking. If they wanted to turn something green, they would take something like parsley, chop it up, and then strain the green into whatever it is they wanted to turn green as a sort of, you know, flavor-giving dye stuff. So yeah, that's a kind of a common medieval cooking technique that you do see in a lot of the different sources. There you go, zabaglione. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Just complete brain block. Yeah, zabaglione appears in 15th century Italian cookbooks already. So it's just, I get really excited when things like that happen. Yeah, that's one of my favorite dishes for certain. I love making it because there is something so wonderful about the alchemy of taking wine and egg yolks, and going from having this thin, unappealing liquid to this beautiful, thick, rich deliciousness. And I love watching it happen. I love watching the critical moment when it goes from thin, thin unappealingness to thick yumminess. Like that's, I don't know why, but that's beautiful and fascinating to me. It's like moments like that where I sort of, yeah, believe perhaps in a higher power. Anyway, I don't want to wander down the path of mysticism and and belief and faith and all of that, but that is just one of those magic moments for me in cooking. Those transitional, transformational moments really fascinate me in general. So I do love making a good bound sauce. It's probably also why I love making hollandaise and béarnaise and even mayonnaise. I love all of those sauces that rely on the power of chemistry and physics to come together properly. Yeah. Sabaglione. I can't believe I couldn't remember that word. So stupid. It's definitely one of my favorite things. I do love reading medieval cookbooks and seeing all the things that they use that you shouldn't eat. Like, you know, some of the food dyes that they use, you're like, oh, well, that's toxic. You shouldn't use that in your food. Same thing with medieval manuals of health and whatnot. So my main issue with Pennsic was not the event, but that it was so damn hot during the day and trying to stay cool. Well, I hate to tell you this. This was a cool Pennsic. This was a very cool Pennsic. Temperature is hardly for the most days, it never got above 78. And the highest it actually got, I think, was 84 or 85. But for the most part, temperatures were in the upper 70s. I was thinking about this. This is nothing like a hot Pennsic. Hot Pennsics are where the temperatures get up into the upper 90s, and it's just humid all the time. I think the problem is a lot of people spend their lives, yeah, it wasn't that humid for Pennsic. Yeah, I mean, I hate to say this. This was a cool Pennsic. And it was barely ever got up to 88. Most days it really was in the upper 70s if you look back at the official temperature chart. The first day, the first Friday, that was brutal. It was like 96 degrees and 90% humidity. It was pretty intense. But that was the setup Friday. I think a lot of people spend so much time in climate-controlled environments that when they actually have to live in a non-climate controlled environment for a week or two, they're just not used to it. I, on the other hand, grew up without air conditioning in a place that's really hot and really humid. You may or may not be able to see the glisten on my face from the moisture just sort of pulled on my skin. I think I just saw a baby fox ahead. Are you a baby fox? Huh. Nothing like a little downtown fox for fun. No, that's a cat. Okay. Anyway, I think a lot of people aren't used to actually living in unclimate controlled environments anymore. I mean, I remember one hot Pennsic where we literally laid on the dance floor and stared up at the pavilion ceiling because it was too hot to actually, I'm not going to go back into that dark tunnel, where it was actually too hot to move, and we just laid there staring at the ceiling thinking about dancing. And we kind of verbalized the thoughts we had about dancing, but we didn't act on them. Yeah, that was a Pennsic where temperatures were in the upper 90s. I think people also maybe need some strategies for how to handle their feeling of heat. For instance, what's really crucial, really super crucial, are white linen undergarments. White because it reflects the sun, and also you can wash the hell of it and not worry about it fading. But linen, because linen is like the best fabric for heat. Its natural properties are to whisk the moisture from your skin and the heat thereby with it, and it breathes super well, and so it creates this evaporative cooling effect. And I think a lot of people don't actually have the proper linen layers, but then people also think that wearing a single layer is a good idea, but really, if you look at how people survive in the desert, they cover themselves entirely and dress in layers to create this insulating layered effect. And instead of doing that, a lot of people just go to a single layer and then they wonder why they're so hot. But really, you actually do need 2 layers at least to create the barrier between the sun and yourself, and to allow for that layered cooling effect to do its thing. Also, if you wear a coif, you keep the sun off of your head. A linen coif, the sun stays off of your head, so you actually thereby are cooler. And if you wet the coif, then you get evaporative cooling on your head, which is very, very helpful because, of course, you know, whether your head is covered or not really makes a difference in the temperature of your body. So Maybe next year I'll do a Pennsic prep video on my 10 tips for surviving the Pennsic heat, because I think people underestimate the value of linen, one, as a natural cooling fabric, and also they don't take advantage of evaporative cooling to, you know, not die of overheating. Also, that's something one of my ladies in waiting, my apprentices in waiting, actually combined lady in waiting apprentice, she wisely stopped using air conditioning in her home several weeks before Pennsic so that she could get used to normal summer temperatures being part of daily life, so that it wasn't such a shock to her system when she got to Pennsic. And actually, I thought that was really clever, a really clever thing to do. Yeah, so, you know, Pennsic heat, I think it's best if you have linen layers, wet some of them so that you get that cooling effect. Also that you, several weeks in advance, you start living more outside, spending more time outside in actual summer weather, and maybe turning off the air conditioning or turning down the air conditioning in your home so that you are prepared for a world without climate control. Yeah. Let me see. I would like that video. My two have been cooler, but I know it's just a matter of time. Yeah. Yeah, a hot Pennsic is coming. We are owed one practically. Yeah, I've often had the misfortune for my ball, my Feast of the Phoenix or my red and gold ball, to fall on a very, very humid evening, which means that I couldn't bring myself, it wasn't the heat, it was the humidity. I couldn't bring myself to actually put on a 6-layer of silk, namely my Phoenix costume, over top of everything else. And so I had to choose whether I wanted to be fully gowned and then my Phoenix costume on top of that, or if I wanted to wear just my kirtle and my Phoenix costume. And I felt badly for cheating that way, but those Pennsics, it really was just so crazy humid. You know, humidity was like 90 to 95% almost every day. It was remarkable. It was amazing. Okay, well, everyone, it's been an hour and 22 minutes. And I certainly feel like I've been holding forth for a long time. Are there any specific questions before I call this one good and I schedule another live stream of some kind? Maybe I'll show you the unpacking when I get back to the US. I actually did mean to video my packing up of my encampment, or live stream the packing up of my encampment this Pennsic, but we had that rain that came the night before on Thursday night, and I was just trying desperately to get packed up in time to leave that I forgot to set up the camera. And sorry, guys. It is an interesting thing to watch how I pack, or how I pack down that entire encampment into like half the bed of a pickup truck with all of my clothes and everything, but probably useful too. So yeah, I might do a live stream on I think I probably will do a live stream on post-Pennsic garb care when I get back to Korea. You know, all the rinsing and the washing and the oiling and all of that sort of stuff. Yeah, I did hear that it rained crazy on Friday night going into Saturday, and that's kind of why we decided to leave Friday. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Are there any other questions or comments? Thank you, Tommaso. I'm glad you enjoyed watching. Well, as always, guys, if you are enjoying this, please do remember to hit the thumbs up. And if you want to do me a solid, as they say, after the video posts, if you could leave a comment under the video, that would really help. It was great visiting with you, Darius. I'm sorry we didn't get like any real time at Pennsic, which is just, you know, the way it is when you're a parent. I get it. And my crazy sleep schedule. Okay, everyone. Well, have a lovely evening, and I hope to see you guys at some other point. Bye, everyone. Have a nice evening.